I want to say welcome to everybody for joining us on this session. This is part 2 of the webinar session regarding the request for application to be one of the 9 Louisiana STEM Regional STEM Network Centers. This is one of the efforts to create a network across the state. I'll go into a few key points and do a real quick recap from last session. As you can see on the screen there, there's plenty of documents and there's some recordings. Also, this particular recording that we're doing right here, it'll be posted just as in the first one. Because of the fact that we went through the RFA document, which is on the website fairly thoroughly in the first webinar series, we're not going to go into as much detail on this one. We're going to have a quick recap. However, you can find the RFA video recordings at this website right here. So the purpose of this particular session is to, ideally in the first session, what we did was we went through the RFA document. We had a brief kind of Q&A type piece at the end of that webinar. And the idea was that we wanted to give people time. So I believe we gave until May 3rd for people to submit their questions. At the end of it, I think we went through it very thoroughly. And at the end of it, there was quite a few people that commented saying very thorough, appreciate the information. And so I guess it was kind of thorough because whenever at the end of May 3rd, no questions were submitted. So hopefully during this session, we're gonna, the goal is to hit a few of these high points from last one, then go right into some talking points. And I'll explain to you how I got these talking points based off of other questions, the end of last session, and a few other things. And we're going to kind of hopefully that'll stimulate any questions moving forward. On the Zoom at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A component. I would encourage you as we go through these that if you have any questions as the topics are discussed, that you would type up a question as we go along. And the idea is as we get to the talking points, and I would imagine that there may be some during the first recap. However, if you've reviewed the first part 1 webinar, probably not going to be that many. I do envision that there will be more questions being generated from the talking points that we'll discuss in just a little while towards the end. So after the talking points, we'll have a Q&A, and that's where we'll actually go to that Q&A component. So I'd encourage you to use the Q&A piece and submit your question as we go along. Now at this time, I want to introduce our panelists. I'll first start out. I'll kind of go throughout my list right here. We have Ms. Kelly Taylor White. I'll allow her to introduce herself.
I am Kelly Taylor White. I'm the director of the Workforce Investment Council with the Louisiana Workforce Commission. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Dr. Susanna Craig.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today for this Q&A session for our RFA. I'm the Senior Associate Commissioner in the Office of Academic Affairs, Innovation, and Student Success.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Randall Brumfield. You're muted, Dr. Brumfield. Dr. Brumfield.
Okay, so mark your bingo card. I was the one who went mute. So my name is Randall Brumfield. I serve as Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs, Innovation, and Student Success in the Board of Regents, and I work with Susanna and David. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Brumfield. We're going to go with Susie and then Nathan. Susie Shaw. You're muted too, Susie.
Is that better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually on my phone, so I assumed I could just unmute there. I'm Susie Schoen. I'm the Director of Workforce Initiatives for LAD Fast Start, which is the Workforce Development Division of Louisiana Economic Development. I'm glad to be with you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Nathan Corley.
Hey, everybody. I'm Nathan Corley. I'm the STEM specialist with the Louisiana Department of Education. I work primarily with high schools across Louisiana that are implementing our 8 STEM pathways. Glad to be here.
And thank you all for joining us. Appreciate your time. And I believe there may be a few other panelists that may join in as we move forward. And when we get to the talking points, if that is the case, we'll introduce them at that time. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the part one recap. And I'm not going to spend much time, so I'm going to be going quite a bit fast on this. And the idea is I want to be efficient with everybody's time, and this was already pre-recorded on the first one, and it's about 45 minutes with about 15 minutes of question and answers at the end. So the request for application has 5 main components. It has the application criteria, and then it has 4 addendums in regards to the purpose and goals, regional focus areas, the parameters, and the LOSTEM goals and objectives. And like I said, this has all been recorded, and you can follow that YouTube link. It's also on the website, the LOSTEM website, under the Regional STEM Centers section, under the About section. Okay, so for the addendum 1, and there's a piece in regards to criteria that there were some questions that were being asked since our last webinar, not through the way that we were trying to collect questions, but through other entities interested in applying, that whenever we get kind of towards the end of the talking points or the Q&A, I'm going to actually bring up some of the rubric in regards to some of their questions that they asked and give some recommendations and kind of some things to look forward to that you can use as resources. So one of the things as we're doing this is think of the 9 regional STEM network centers as doing 3 main things, and that is establishing communication both regionally as a point of contact and all the way on a statewide basis, so that we can have statewide efforts, as well as having the support on the state level in regards to if there's need for changes or policy changes, we can advocate for those things as regards to the LOSTEM Advisory Council and the makeup of our council, and then also for resources. So you can envision this as communication, support, and resources flowing from the region to the state and from the state back to the region. Not so much resources flowing to the state, but you get the idea. Those are the 3 main things that we're trying to establish this network to do. And as we do this, we're not only doing on a state level, we're doing on a national alignment. The regional focus areas, you can see right here, these are the 9 regional focus areas. This was based off of the regional labor market area by the Louisiana Workforce Commission. Originally there was 8. There was a working group we had established, and there was a component that was brought up, some justification, the economic backgrounds, educational tie-ins, different things of that nature. And they brought together before the working group and their explanation and justification to create a 9th region. And that is this is the one that was agreed upon. The idea was we wanted to try to create something that was from something already established and without much modifications at all. And so that's why we went with the Louisiana Workforce Commission's regional breakdown. Now, one thing I do want to point out is these regional focus areas, they are not hardbound regions. So in other words, if there's going to be a lot of times where different regions are going to partner with another region, it's not a, you can only go within that particular region, and any other things that go out of that region or another region comes into that region, that is not the case. You want to think of these as focus areas, because partnering and collaboration is going to be huge, huge, huge regarding this STEM network that we're going to create for Louisiana. The parameters, the regional STEM director is required for a regional STEM network center. These are a few of the things that you can kind of see what they would be some of their main tasks. In regards to the hiring process, so the basic process of this is the applications will be received, they'll be assessed, they'll be scored, and then each region will have a regional STEM network center. Like I said, there will be encouragement for partnerships and different things of that nature. Then they will go forward in the process of creating a contract or MOU/contract that is going to be between the Board of Regents and the entity identified. And that's probably going to take about a month, month and a half, depending on how everything goes. So in regards to the STEM director, originally the RFA had recommendations for the director. However, after reviewing and understanding that there's 2 parts basically to this, the initial application and then the contract negotiation, it was agreed upon that these discussions as part of the regional STEM or the LOSTEM Advisory Council and different things that were brought before them will be kind of brought up at that time to create the contract between the entity and the Louisiana Board of Regents. So the addendum 4, this is the 4th and last one, it's in regards to goals and objectives. Now, I do want to just point out one quick thing right here. You can see these 5 goals, and you can read more on the RFA document. There's also, if you, because we're in February 13th, our quarterly meeting, I brought before the LASTEM Advisory Council the concept of actually aligning our goals, LASTEM goals, to the National STEM Strategic Plan, which is actually called America's Strategy for STEM Education. If you Google this, you can find it. There was, this was December 2018, and then October 2019, there was a report on, there's an annual report that comes out every October. The one from last year was called the Progress Report on the Federal Implementation of STEM Education Plan. So if those are, I would encourage you, because we're in the steps or the phase of trying to transition to a national alignment. So we're creating a crosswalk between the existing goals, which were prior to the national STEM goals. So since the STEM goals have come out, we have wanted to align because we feel that it is best for the state, and then reporting, different types of resources, things of that nature. So I'd encourage you, as you look at goals and alignment, that you also look at the National STEM Strategic Plan. You can see the framework, the goals, the pathways identified in those documents. So I would use those both as an entity as you're writing up your application and trying to justify why you fit as the best, you are the best fit for that regional STEM network center. And by the way, in our May 20th meeting, we plan to present the crosswalk. By the way, I was in discussions with the White House regarding this plan, and they were favorable, they had favorable comments about this. And so they wanted me to get back with them after we actually had our meeting on May 20th, which is our second quarterly meeting, and tell them the outcome, and then we'd kind of go from there. So that I would encourage you to use those as well. This is the accountability, sustainability measure. These are quite a few things, and these are all within the RFA, and I'm not going to really go over this. I will come back to the rubric and the criteria as part of a Q&A piece at the end, because I have, like I said, I had some questions that came up. Hey, when we're doing the application and we want to put this in there, where do we put it? And so I created a base little template and some kind of recommendations for those who are actually writing the application. And I'll discuss that in a little bit. Now, one last thing is that the extension, originally it was May 29th, I believe, but due to the corona health crisis, we actually extended this to June 30th at 5:00 p.m. I believe it's midweek or something along those lines, but we tried to give an extra month, and we're glad we did due to the different things that have kind of taken place. All right, and now we're going to move along to our talking points. By the way, there was a question at the end of last webinar on April 23rd that they wanted to know if we would actually make available the slides so that they could actually see them for reference. And we did actually do that. And also we had actually recorded the video, which we plan to do at this one, and we will put that one on the website as well. So yes, they are uploaded, they are there. Also, there is a live feed that is actually taking place. I posted on the website prior to the start of this in case anybody did not get a chance to register and they still wanted to actually view the video in live real streaming time. All right, so now we're going to get into our talking points, and I'm going to be asking, see in this instance. So when we get to this part of the talking points, let me give a little bit of a background. All right, so the idea is that when we look at some of these particular topics, the idea is that we're creating a background. So for example, let's say a primary, secondary entity is interested in applying. They may not be familiar with the surrounding circumstances involving higher education or maybe the workforce. So this is to kind of like give a little bit of enlightenment for the entity wanting to write the application to see how their existing efforts and possible future efforts can tie into maybe the current circumstances and or the future circumstances. So that's kind of the background and as it relies upon these particular ones. And I'm going to take off the sharing, and I'm just going to ask, after I ask these questions. So the first one is in regards to the post-pandemic operation and function regarding whenever they submit their RFA. So in regards to the workforce impact, what can be done to help reignite the economy and fields of STEM as we stand where we are right now? And I will ask Ms. Showen, and any others if they want to do any feedback after that.
So thank you very much, David. I do want to issue a few appropriate caveats at the beginning of my remarks. If I told you that I knew where the economy was going or what we would look like 6 months from now, I would be lying to you, and I'm not going to do that. There are a few things I think that do factor into the question of STEM preparation and how that interacts with what our economy is going to need, and also where opportunities for our people are most likely to be found. One thing we do know is that the unemployment issue is profound. It is not a comfortable story for anybody to tell. We have several 100,000 people who are out of work now. Some of those jobs will return, and some of those people will return to the jobs that they had before. But in many cases, there will be jobs that were available in February that will not be available in July and will not be available in February of 2021. Exactly what that looks like, we don't know. We don't know the magnitude of that, but we can confidently say that there are jobs that people had that they will not have in the future. On the other side, we do have some reason to believe that certain industries will be hiring, and some of them may be hiring at higher levels than they did before. There are a few bright spots, and I don't want to, again, overstate the brightness of the bright spots, but the fact is that there are some indications that we are likely to see employment at least remain steady and job opportunities to remain available in industries like construction, manufacturing, and IT. And these have always been high value industries from the perspective of economic development, because these are economic driver industries, and opportunities to move people from service sector positions into production positions in industries like this are very attractive. And these jobs do tend to be more highly paid and more stable, more resilient than many of the jobs that were available before. And then, of course, there's healthcare. And we know that there are profound impacts in many different and often counterintuitive ways on the healthcare sector. But all of these require STEM-intensive preparation. And if we're going to have an opportunity to have a new economy that is more resilient than the old economy, this is the sort of thing that we need to look at. And if we want to have jobs that are more resilient than the old jobs, this is what we need to look at. So I do want to reiterate the opportunity and the critical importance of STEM preparation to help move us in the direction that we want to go. But again, it's a highly complex, very dynamic, constantly evolving picture. And I'm sure the next time that I talk to all of you, it will have moved a little bit. If anybody would like to ask anything, I certainly.
I do want to ask one question, Susie. Have y'all seen quite a bit of an uptick in some of these support companies? For example, I believe, let's use Zoom, for example. I believe I'd heard that when I was talking with our IT group, that they were saying there was like a 20,000 account increase in a very short amount of time, shortly after the corona and the quarantine. Have y'all seen any kind of similar support companies and like a rapid growth in some of theirs? I know that the impacts of many have caused some jobs and different things like that, but have they also added some jobs?
I honestly am not overtly familiar with the hiring in that sector because it's not really strongly represented here in Louisiana. We are seeing that a number of our IT companies are either maintaining or increasing their hiring levels, but it depends very significantly on the sectors that they serve. So, for example, an IT software consulting company where they develop products for specific industries, if they're serving the oil and gas vertical, they're going to struggle along with that industry. And so there are some nuances to this that we need to bear in mind. But we are certainly seeing hiring in some aspects of that industry. in terms of direct COVID response opportunities, we see a lot of that in spaces like Amazon. Amazon is hiring, and they are hiring in Louisiana. Our state government is hiring contact tracers right now, and they are hiring a lot of them. So there are job opportunities that are coming directly as a result of this.
Thank you, Susie. Kelly, do you have any additional feedback?
Not anything significant right at this moment. I agree with what Susie said, that we have pockets of industries that are doing hiring in response to the COVID situation. The overall unemployment is so volatile right now, especially with not knowing which businesses are going to be able to operate at that 25% capacity and such. And we're all operating in a new norm, and we're trying to adjust as we go, minute by minute, business by business, job by job.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate that. And Susie, thanks for your comments. All right, we're going to move on to the second one. And this was, like we said, if there's K-12 workforce and they're trying to see what's being played out or what's being discussed in regards to options for the fall as it relates to higher education. And I will revert to Dr. Susanna Craig, if she could give her feedback on this.
Sure. So what does higher education look like in the fall of 2020? That question is on everyone's mind, right? What we do know is that all of the institutions of higher education for summer school of 2020 will be operating on an online component. There are some courses that are more lab-based or career and technical education courses that need to be physically there. We'll be able to operate with the numbers of 10 and under. And many of them are moving to larger spaces so that students and the instructor can be physically distant from one another. So as we look towards fall, again, we're waiting to see as we restart Louisiana and as different industries and educations begin to open back up, we have to go through the phases just like everyone else. And so the shift on May the 15th, on Friday, will just shift us into phase 1. So the plan for many of the institutions is to be face-to-face if possible. But I think all institutions are planning online components into their coursework in case we would need to flip the switch again back to digital learning. Right now, everyone is in a wait and see mode to see where we're going to be.
Thank you, Dr. Craig. Dr. Brumfield, do you have any comments on that? Or nope, you muted again.
No, I was just, thanks. I was just going to say, I think Susanna pretty much covered it. The only thing that I would add, which is what Susie and Kelly alluded to, is understanding about what a quality credential of value looks like coming out of COVID. And that's sort of the $1 million question that I think as part of this initiative is concerned anyway, can really help drive some of that conversation. And so what we know now and what we know prior to COVID might be different than when we emerge from it. So I think this is a really good opportunity to think about what type of credential is of value to citizens across the state as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Brumfield. All right, so we're gonna do our third and last one as part of this topic, and that is, what does primary and secondary education look like in regards to as the start of the fall 2020. I had Joe Cowart originally at Nathan Corley. I'm going to ask that you could speak on LDOE's behalf.
Sure. Things for us are no more certain than they are for workforce or post-secondary. We're doing our best to prepare for every eventuality. That could mean rolling outages from district to district. That could mean partial attendance. In my own work, I'm working with the STEM providers to try to just encourage them to make sure that they have a plan to easily transition teachers back to a virtual environment should that become necessary next year. Another issue that we're facing is, regardless of what the school year looks like next year, we're going to have every kid in the state essentially miss a quarter of this school year. So we're working on some guidance for districts and our providers to help them kind of overcome that gap. I'm going to drop in the chat here a link to some of the documents that we're sending out right now, if anybody would like to view those. But again, beyond just trying to support and be ready, we can't be any more certain than that right now.
Okay, and I know this is being a recording and some things will not be available. So for the recording's sake, it is louisianabelieves.com/resources/strong-start-2020. So for those of you viewing the video. All right, thanks everyone. I appreciate those comments. We're going to jump back to our presentation here. Okay, in regards to the RFA application emphasis, does the proposal need to be written with a prioritization in regards to the health crisis? Now this one, I would encourage our panelists to give their feedback. I know this was asked in our last webinar towards the end. And what I had recommended, and I believe Dr. Brumfield had commented and kind of said that that would be a good approach, was to take the application that you're writing on behalf of you trying to justify why you deserve to be identified as the Regional STEM Network Center. Take that application and do it in a sense of all business being usual, because there's so many uncertainties right now. We don't really know how to line out this, you know, like Susie said earlier, you know, if I knew the future of the workforce, I'd, you know, be in a great position. But anyway, the idea is to do it as business as usual. However, if there's components within there that you want to include just to strengthen the application as to different things that may be STEM related that that your organization has actually done on behalf of the response to this. I know there was institutions that created different testing swabs and face masks, and they 3D printed things. Those are all different things that I would say would only strengthen the application. Dr. Craig, anyone else have any comments as a part of, okay. All right.
No,
so
I think that makes sense. I mean, the focus hasn't changed, but if you include that information, I think that's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we will see. All right. Okay. The Regional STEM Network Centers funding outlook. This one, I will just jump right on over to Dr. Craig and let her answer this one.
Sure. Originally, we submitted in the budget for this fiscal year $1 million with the intent to fund
All 9, right?
all 9 regions, if possible, to have one STEM center. The budget is up in the air right now. We will not know until later in June whether we are receiving any or all of the funding. However, we have had some discussions internally about, if we do not receive the funding, about an opportunity to operate a pilot program where we might fund a smaller number of regional STEM centers in a pilot, so that we can get these off the ground running this year and then try for full funding next year. Again, everything is still up in the air until the legislature makes decisions about the state budget, and that will not happen until later in June. But there is the possibility or the plan to fund potentially, I don't want to put a number, but some of the best proposals. So please put forth your best proposal. Our intent is to fund a pilot, at least a minimum of a pilot.
And if I could make
is that as non-committal as possible, David?
Okay, thanks, Dr. Craig. So just to kind of recap on what Dr. Craig just mentioned, we had it funded, and the idea, and this was in the first webinar we discussed this, the idea was this is a cost sharing program. So it doesn't fully fund the Regional STEM Network Center nor the Regional STEM Network Center director and their salary. But it's part of a cost sharing program. There is the match type of concept. I believe we had concluded that we wanted to keep it simple. And so originally we had 100,000 that would go towards each region, and that would be part of the contract. Primarily, it would cover the regional STEM director salary and any other kind of basic operating cost in that sense. So ideally, we would like to keep it simple as well. And so the idea was, let's do the first half before the end of December 2020, and then we'll do the second half in the spring of 2021. So now, and everything looked great, and then Corona hit, and so here we are with Plan B. And the idea is to get a pilot phase to where we can have a smaller number, and we can actually create and set up a structure of communication, best practices, how things are reported, how things are communicated on a regional basis, statewide basis, discovering resource opportunities, discovering what other regions are doing. And best practices. So the idea is that we have a pilot year, and then as we approach the end of this coming up year, this year, for the next year, we would plan to reintroduce that funding again. So we are, unless something crazy happens, we definitely are optimistic moving forward with the pilot group. So I'll kind of jump on over in regards to application details, and I'll share my screen real quick. So application details. So some of these questions were asked, and by the way, these questions were generated from the end of last April 23rd webinar. There were some questions asked during that session. I had different entities across the state asking separately. Some had called, some had just, different things. Most of the time it was just email communication. Hey, can you, what about this? What about that? So some of these, these remaining questions are kind of following that. So for example, the application details, who pays the director? It would be the entity that is selected for that region. Now, like I said, some of the other states that did these types of regional hubs or regional network centers or whatever you want to call them, they encouraged partnerships with other entities that were leaders for that region as well, and that is something that we definitely want to promote. In fact, if you look in the rubric, it talks about partnerships not only with business industry but also other entities that are interested. So the actual entity that is selected, and there's going to be a lead. So some have asked, can they partner together multiple entities and submit one application? Yes, they can, as long as one is identified as the lead entity, because they will be named as that particular regional STEM network center, and that entity would have the regional STEM director housed in some fashion or in whatever way. Now also, let me just say one quick thing. When we talk about the regional STEM network center, it's not necessarily a physical space, okay? Yes, it does require an office for the director. It does require, the support. So there'll be funding that would be provided. And then the cost sharing component is that, a secretary, basic operating office supplies, a desktop, basic minimal travel expenses, the phone for the office, those different things as part of the cost sharing program. Now that's that person is the point of contact for the region. They're the one rallying the troops and discussing and disseminating information. But there are some that I believe will actually say, hey, we have this building or this wing of a building that we are going to call the Regional STEM Network Center. And it would actually be a physical space in addition to the part of the director collaborating, rallying the troops, disseminating information. So the thing is that as part of that rubric, whenever you look at the resources, that's the type of thing that you want to include if you're going to say that, because it only strengthens the score of what your entity's application is going to be when it's all said and done. So with that being said, and let me finish this. Does it require a budget? I'm going to I'm going to talk about this in just a minute. I'm going to go back up to the rubric itself, and I'm going to answer a few other questions. Yes, partnerships are beneficial. Can directors be shared? No, they cannot. And understand the reason and purpose for this is that there are some high-level individuals maybe that have a full-time job, and then the definite thing that we don't want to do is that this person has a large load on their plate already, or just they have a load on their plate, and then this is kind of an extra thing that they do for the entity. But here's the thing: keep in mind that this is not just for the entity. There will be perks for the entity indirectly, but this is for the region. So they're not hiring on just for the that particular organization or institution or entity, whatever. They're hiring on as a point of contact representing the region. So the idea is that they have this is their main job. Their main job is to do and oversee these things and oversee what's going on, find out the needs, actually be able to communicate. If they don't have resources available there, we communicate on a state level. Then from there, we can communicate on a national level. Whatever it is, we'll try to find the resources needed or the support or the best practices so that they can meet the needs for each region. And who is applying? That was one of the other questions that was asked. At this time, we've only had inquiries. Certain ones we have ideas of they're showing interest, but until June 30th, and the applications were actually in. And I believe the person that was asking about this was because they were interested in maybe seeing who's applying so they could possibly partner with them. My advice would be that you reach out to other entities that you are familiar, that they are actually being strong in your region for STEM, and then see if they are interested in applying. And maybe they may not be interested in applying, but maybe they're interested in partnering. So either way, I would encourage you to do that if that is something you would like to check on. So before we get to the Q&A for the panelists, I'm going to go up to right here. Hope everybody can see this. And this is in the RFA, and I'm going to basically, I was going to post this, but then I had some questions and I wanted to go through this because what I'm going to post is a formatting guide and template. And it's going to be a real simple template. For the most part, the template, you can find it within the RFA as far as the criteria portion, the first portion. And that would be kind of along the lines of how you go about writing your, the gist of how everything would flow for your application submission. However, to make things simple, I'm going to kind of create like a, because if you look at the actual rubric right here, and then you look at the criteria, some jargon may be slightly different. So I'm going to create like this little mini crosswalk thing that kind of shows how they tie together. And then I'm going to put a few things. And then I'm also, as part of this guide, I'm actually going to put some formatting requirements as part of the submission process. So I hope to have that by Friday of this week, and it'll be posted on the same website that we had discussed. So everybody that's interested in it, if you do not stay up late on Friday, definitely check on Monday and you'll have it. And it'll be under the section of the RFA on our website. So, but I do want to kind of, this is mainly geared towards the people who are going to be writing the application. So you're going to start off with an introduction, then you're going to have the office location and facilities, and basically is trying to see, you know, are you in the kind of like in a very reasonable area for your region? Are you on the very tip and end? You know, where are you located in regards to how you would service that? The primary contact information. So then the mission alignment to the STEM goals. So this is in regards to the mission of this entity. How does that align to basic STEM goals just in general? And then you're going to revert to the fourth one, which is the LA STEM goals alignment. Now, like I said, keep in mind, when you look at the LA STEM goals alignment, I would encourage you to look at the national, STEM education strategic plan, their goals that they have and their pathways and how that ties in. And it may even be beneficial if you point to specific goals. This goal of what we have actually ties in with goal number 3 of the LA STEM, but also ties into goal 2 for the National STEM Strategic Plan. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it would probably make for easier referencing. Then there's the fees and expenses waived or matched. Keep in mind, whenever the entities are selected and the ones who won for the regions are selected as the smaller number, it's going to be who's resource ready. And if you want to think of this, there's this part on fees and expenses waived or matched. This would be where you would include your budget. Okay. Now, keep in mind, is a budget totally necessary? Maybe not so much, but it would be very beneficial to those evaluating your particular application whenever you're able to itemize different things of what your institution is willing to either waive or provide, or the additional resources as far as the entity itself. Um, Relationships and partnerships, and that is current relationships, partnerships, organizations. Some have regional advisory committees, some do not. The idea is, are you connected with your regional stakeholders, the ones who are important for your region? That's the main part of that. STEM education leadership experience in the region. Is this something that your entity is just trying to get kicked off on? Or is this something that you have actually established and you've done over the past however many years? That is what we're looking for there, is experience. The resource development. So now there was a question, in fact, it was earlier today that was asked as far as, we have an idea of what we think this network center, how it would operate on a daily basis. Where would we put that in the application? I would say you would want to put it under the resource development. And think of the resource development in contrast to the fees and expenses waived. The fees and expenses waived or matched, you would almost think of that as like what the entity is willing to provide itself, on behalf of, hey, we're going to waive this or do that or provide this. And then the resource development would be more along the lines of what the entity is willing to provide for the region. All right, so that's kind of like if you want to have a little better understanding. And I would say it would be a much stronger application if you put down what you would envision how the regional STEM Network Center operates for your region on a daily basis, because that would let us know that, or let the people evaluating know how you have really thought this through and you've really tried to plan ahead and think about it. Then reporting and communication, this is actually not in the rubric, but it is in the criteria on the RFA. This is a requirement. There's reports that will be reported throughout the year. And then also the communication, so that the communication of the network across the state is established. Subject matter expertise. What is this unique STEM expertise that you have, maybe that nobody else has, or maybe that just makes you stand out? That would be the section you would put there. Additional information. Any body that would have, and it's not really right here, but it actually is in the RFA. If you have letters of support, I would say that you would put it in here. You would reference it and maybe put it as, towards the back of your application. See, appendices this or whatever it is, and that would be where you would identify your letters of support from your region, maybe partnerships, different things like that. I wouldn't put the actual letters there. Put it towards the back of the document, but you can reference them right there. And then finally, you would have a summary of, justify bringing all these things into a summary format and concept, identifying why you are the region, the entity that should represent your region going forward as part of this project. So I did want to do that because there was some questions regarding that. So let me go back down to, okay, so right now, this would be the Q&A for the panelists, all right? And so I'm gonna...
So David, I'm gonna go ahead and start. We've had a couple of questions come through. I think you just answered Mr. Norman's question about where to put letters of support, so thank you for that. We've had someone ask about the $100,000. Is that intended to cover all of the salary and fringe benefits for the STEM Center director?
So think of it this way. Instead of doing a 50-50 match, like I said, we wanted to keep it simple and sweet for both accounting at the Board of Regents and accounting at the whichever entity is identified. So the idea is that this is part of the cost sharing component. This would be what would be awarded to that entity. There would be a contract process that would establish different things that fit under the umbrella of what is acceptable, expenditures or cost associated under this umbrella as part of this cost sharing program. So For example, let's say, and more than likely, we'd have like a monthly invoice that the entity would invoice us. You can either do, so we kind of, like I said, we want to make it easy. So for example, let's say the entity wanted to maybe recoup some of the initial expenses up front. So let's say they wanted to pay for the salary, the first month's salary of the actual regional STEM director. Maybe they wanted to pay for the salary benefits of the actual of a secretary or some type of support. Maybe they want to pay for the computer that was bought, the telephone that was bought, a few different things. Maybe they want to recoup a little bit of those funds up front. That would be how they could do it. They could invoice on a monthly basis. Or maybe you could just invoice for the salary of that person on a monthly basis. More than likely, it probably would not cover the total salary and benefits for that director over the span of a year. So if you wanted to keep it simple, you could probably just invoice for the salary and benefits for the director. And more than likely, it would just be one piece every month throughout the year. But we do want to give the option that if there is some things that they, maybe due to budget restrictions or things that are kind of hitting them in at that time that they're trying to implement, or maybe due to the health crisis, maybe there's things like that. They want to try to maybe get a little bit more on the front end. That's up to them. All in all, when it's said and done, the cost associated with the director and the director functioning as that director for the region, between the 100 and the remaining has to be covered from the actual entity. I hope that answered the question.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm asking because this excluded university professors, assistant professors, and STEM salary is around 70,000.
I've answered that. I've been answering questions in the chat.
Okay.
I guess I'll just, the Board of Regents is committing $100,000. It's up to your region to create a budget to determine how that is going to be spent. Is that the best way to say it?
Yeah, that sounds, like I said, it has to function. So the supporting cost associated with that office and that director, that has to be covered, and it's a cost sharing piece. So we provide a certain amount committed. The remaining is covered by the entity. And that's part of what will be identified. So when you say like, this is okay to invoice for, that'll be part of the contract. And there's, depending on whether this is private, whether this is public, depending on the hiring policies or the policies set forth at that entity, that's all going to come into play as part of this when we're actually going through this process and creating the contract. So I believe that's all the questions that I can see. Any of our panelists? Anybody else have any? I'll tell you what, well then, we'll go ahead and do this. Let's have some closing comments, and then we'll, if we don't have any questions before that, then we will go ahead and close it out. So I'm going to start, and I'll kind of go down the same rotation I did earlier. Ms. Kelly, do you have any closing comments you'd like to say?
No, sir, I was just muted.
I just unmuted you, I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I don't have any closing comments other than, just be as thorough as you can in the current situation.
Dr. Craig, any closing comments?
Yes, we just we want regions to be creative in how they create this cost sharing model and how they work together with workforce partners in their region, as well as university partners and K-12. We're looking for innovation, and so be creative.
Thanks, Dr. Craig.
Definitely apply.
Definitely. Dr. Brumfield?
Yeah, so I would just echo my colleagues, and anything that helps drive or spur meeting what regional needs are, and maybe looking at being intentional about goals and objectives, and how the work that will be carried through the regional centers will help meet the needs of those local communities, I think would serve beneficial for an application.
Thanks, Dr. Brumfield. Susie, Sean?
Thank you, David. I just wanted to say a couple of words on collaboration, and I know that some people have had some questions along these lines, and David will correct me if I misspeak on this subject. But we do, as Susanna was just making clear, really want to see a lot of cross-sector collaborations built into the applications already. That will strengthen the application. But if we receive a couple of very strong applications from a region, as I understand it, David, our plan is that we may very well come back to folks and see if there's a way to build a collaboration there and have that discussion. And there may be, in terms of an award, a recommendation that an additional partner in a missing sector be included if it's seen as a missing component of the application. Is that fair to say, David?
Yes, Susie, thanks for bringing that up. So if you want to think of it this way, the idea is partnering. So in the event there are two stronger candidates, like Susie's mentioned, that apply, we anticipate that the actual rubric amongst the committee that would be actually going through this would actually have one that would stand out numerically above the other. However, one would, if that is the case, like I said, there's definitely going to be an encouragement of partnerships moving forward. We don't want there to be, people or entities just trying to do their own thing. We want there to be partnerships. There's going to be so many different things that each region can benefit from partnering with the businesses, with the other regions, the different best practices. For example, there may be a statewide license that one region has, maybe some software application, but yet only a few within that region is using it. Well, then this gives an opportunity maybe to share that license with other regions. That's just a real small example, but there's so many different things that there are a lot of things. It's about communication, and a lot of people are unaware of the opportunities that exist across the state. So did that answer your question, Susie? I believe so. All right. Well, so I'm going to move along to Nathan, Mr. Corley. You have any closing comments?
Nothing really that hasn't already been said. I just think that, if nothing else, we can definitely say we're facing a different kind of problem right now. And so we need to look for different solutions. And I think that there's a need for creativity in these applications.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Corley. All right. So this pretty much wraps up our webinar session. I want to say strong thanks to all of our panelists, Kelly Taylor White, Dr. Susanna Craig, Dr. Brumfeld, Randall Brumfeld, and Ms. Susie Shao and Nathan Corley. All terrific feedback. Thanks for being a panelist. Thanks for all of our attendees. I think at one point I saw almost 90 or something along those lines, attendees plus our panelists. So I believe we were able to get people to kind of spread the word, which was the ultimate goal. Remember, June 30th is the deadline. I'll have the formatting guide and template. I'll have that posted to our website by Friday of this week, and you can use that, and it should kind of give you some basic guide for those writing actual applications. Other than that, thanks a bunch. I hope everyone is able to be informed and is going to be considering applying, and we're looking forward to the great things for the state of Louisiana. Until then, take care.